The morning air inside Kestrel Tech's open concept office was unusually tense. You could feel it in the way fingers hesitated above keyboards and in how coffee cups were sipped with cautious timing. Everyone knew something was coming. It came in the form of Camilla Royce, towering, composed, and surgically cold in her designer blazer, as she glided between cubicles like she was walking a runway laced with prey. She stopped at desk 34. "Faye," she said with the kind of grin that was all enamel and no warmth. "Let's not make this more difficult than it has to be." Faye Alder looked up, setting down her stylus and tablet. She'd been sketching interface redesigns all morning, fixes for flaws Camilla would never have bothered to notice. The office fell into an eerie hush as co-workers paused, pretending not to eavesdrop. "We're restructuring," Camilla said, voice honeyed with mock empathy. "And frankly, your role just doesn't add enough value to justify the cost." Her smile widened, as if delivering a corporate sermon. "You've always been more of an observer than a contributor. This is a company that rewards boldness." The jab landed with surgical precision. Camilla was good at this, cutting people down so smoothly it almost felt like mercy. Faye blinked once. Twice. Then quietly, understood. Camilla looked mildly disappointed. "No begging? No tears? No dramatic plea? You'll receive the standard exit packet from HR," she said. "Please be out by 3 p.m. Faye nodded once, calmly. "Thank you." Camilla pivoted, heels clicking like war drums as she strutted away, leaving whispers in her wake. But what Camilla didn't know, and what not a single soul in that room suspected, was that Faye Alder wasn't just a design consultant. She was the majority owner of Kestrel Tech. The woman they dismissed as deadweight was the flame that lit the company in the first place. 3 years ago, after the passing of her brother, the previous CEO, Faye had quietly stepped back from public view. She'd watched the board scramble to install someone who would appeal to investors and usher in aggressive growth. Camilla Royce had been the golden candidate. Former tech VP at two Silicon Valley darlings, she knew how to speak fluently in disruption and scalability. She presented herself as the perfect storm: efficiency, style, ambition. Faye, however, had her doubts. Kestrel Tech wasn't built on shiny pitches and quarterly spikes. It was born in her brother's cluttered garage with Faye coding UI and him building hardware. They'd grown it carefully, emphasizing accessibility, ethics, and employee-first policies. They had made enough money to thrive, but they had never lost their soul. Camilla brought in flashy clients and slashed legacy projects. The board cheered. Profits rose. Faye watched quietly. From the inside, she took a new identity: Faye Miller, UI consultant. No one recognized her in oversized glasses, simple clothes, and a pixie cut. She worked part-time, low-level, often silent in meetings, watching as employees got squeezed, long-term visions scrapped, and community partnerships cut in favor of short-term profit. Now, Camilla had drawn the line. Publicly. And it was the final push Faye needed. By lunchtime, she had boxed up her few belongings, mostly sketches, sticky notes, and one framed photo of her and her brother at a product launch years ago. As she closed the lid, someone approached, Neil from operations. One of the few old-timers still around. "You okay?" he asked softly. Faye nodded. "More than okay." He gave her a curious look but didn't press. "If you need a reference, or anything, I'll be in touch," she said cryptically. He raised a brow but smiled. "You always did have a calm before the storm kind of vibe." As Faye exited the building, quiet, unnoticed, her phone buzzed. It was from Mara, her family's corporate lawyer and longtime friend. Subject: urgent, Camilla's motion for asset restructuring. Details inside. Includes plans to eliminate legacy development, community partnerships, and reduce R&D by 70%. Final vote at tomorrow's 9 a.m. board session. Faye's fingers tightened around her phone. She had planned to wait until the end of the quarter. To gather more. To let Camilla dig her own grave slowly. But there were over 200 jobs on the line now. People she worked beside every day, some of whom didn't even know their entire teams were marked for deletion. She took a breath. Then opened a digital folder she had labeled, months ago, simply, Counter-Strike. It was time to return. Not as Faye Miller, the consultant. But as Faye Alder. The owner. The architect. The fire no one saw coming. Faye didn't sleep that night, not really. She dozed for an hour or two, head resting on a folder of annotated meeting transcripts and red-marked balance sheets. When the sunrise finally cut through her apartment window, She was already dressed in a slate gray pantsuit and polished flats. No more oversized sweaters. No more blending in. She hadn't worn this outfit in over 3 years, since the last board meeting she'd attended as Faye, before she disappeared behind the mask of Miller. But now, the disguise was no longer necessary. Her moment had come. The private car pulled up promptly at 7:45. She rode in silence, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. Kestrel Tech's HQ tower loomed ahead, a sleek glass and steel spire nestled between old-growth elms and a view of the lake. It was strange, returning through the front doors like this. Security gave her a polite nod, not recognizing the woman who had once stood beside the founders in this very lobby, celebrating the company's first patent. Inside the elevator, she took a deep breath and glanced at her reflection in the polished steel wall. This time, she didn't look away. She wasn't just reclaiming her identity. She was reclaiming her company. The boardroom on the 32nd floor was buzzing with early arrivals, key investors, legal advisors, and the 9 board members, most of whom had arrived expecting a quarterly performance review and a rubber stamp approval of Camilla's latest strategy. Camilla herself was already there, standing at the head of the table in a pearl-white blazer, perfectly manicured, surrounded by charts and investor decks. She held court like a queen entertaining nobles, all charm and curated brilliance. She didn't notice Faye enter at first. It was Neil who spotted her, jaw slightly agape. Then 2 other board members turned, one whispering, "Is that?" Camilla turned. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before settling back into icy calculation. "Ms. Miller," she said with a tight smile. "I don't believe you're invited to this level of meeting. This is for corporate stakeholders only." "I am aware," Faye replied evenly. "I'm here as one." A beat of silence. Camilla's gaze narrowed. "And who, exactly, do you think you represent?" Faye set her leather portfolio on the table, flipped it open, and slid a document across to the board's legal counsel. Faye, founding family. Current holder of 78.2% of all Class A voting shares and 9% of the remaining B Class shares. Effective immediately, I am exercising executive override under the Kestrel Charter, Section 11, Article 4. Gasps murmured around the room. Camilla took a half step back, lips parted. "That's not possible. We restructured." "You restructured the departments," Faye interrupted calmly. "Not the shareholder rights. Those were put in place by my brother before he passed, and you either didn't notice or didn't care." Camilla looked toward Richard, the board chair. "This is outrageous. She hasn't been active for years. She hasn't participated in decision-making. Her role has been entirely symbolic." "Symbolic," Faye repeated, as if tasting the word. She stood and walked slowly to the head of the table, her seat. Her voice remained calm, but iron edged into every syllable. "For 3 years, I worked under you. I watched you. I saw you gut our ethics protocols, bury failed usability reports, and slash our innovation pipeline in favor of chasing quarterly gains. I watched you discard people who built this company, people who made it what it was. You used my family's name to pad your resume, and you thought no one was watching. But I was." Camilla's veneer cracked slightly. "You can't just walk back in and pull rank. You'll tank investor confidence, cause a panic. We're in talks with Onyx Systems for acquisition." "Yes," Faye cut in again, "and that acquisition involves eliminating over 300 jobs and licensing out proprietary software we haven't even finished building. Including modules that aren't legally patentable yet. That's called premature disclosure. At best, it's a breach of process. At worst." She raised her eyebrows. "Corporate fraud." Camilla was visibly rattled now, scanning the room for support. Her usual allies were silent. "You think they'll follow you?" she snapped. "They don't want nostalgia. They want growth." Faye's voice dropped, lower and steadier. "They want sustainability. They want trust. They want a future built on more than buzzwords and burnout. You offered them a stock spike. I'm offering them a legacy." Richard, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. "Ms. Alder," he said cautiously, "you're within your rights to call for a leadership review. But these are serious allegations. If you intend to proceed, we'll need full documentation." "I have it," Faye replied, nodding to Mara, who entered with a rolling case and began distributing copies of a report thicker than a phone book. Compiled over the last 2 years, it documented every risky shortcut, every NDA-shrouded settlement, Every quietly abandoned feature that had failed QA testing and had been shelved before a scandal could erupt. Some pages were signed by Camilla herself. "You played a high-stakes game, Camilla," Faye said, "and you forgot who owned the table." It took 3 hours to review the evidence. During that time, Faye spoke rarely, answering only when asked. She didn't need to sell herself, the truth was doing the work for her. Camilla tried to mount a defense, but it fell apart piece by piece. She accused Faye of deception. The board reminded her that Faye had never stepped away as shareholder. She claimed her decisions were necessary to keep the company competitive. Faye presented forecasts showing a 40% drop in innovation pipeline by Q2 next year due to staff attrition. By noon, the vote was called. 7 in favor of her removal. 1 abstained. 1 opposed, Camilla herself. It was done. Camilla left the room flanked by security, her heels now silent against the carpet. She didn't look back. She didn't speak. Faye remained standing at the head of the table. "Today," she said quietly, "we're going to begin again. Not by undoing everything, but by remembering why we started in the first place. I've seen what this company can do when it leads with purpose. I know what it can become again." The room was silent, not with fear, but with possibility. Outside the windows, the city buzzed on. Inside, a new chapter had begun. The next morning, the company cafeteria was unrecognizable, not because of any change in the decor, but because of the mood. People spoke in hushed tones, eyes darting to the elevators every few seconds. Rumors had spread faster than wildfire. Camilla Royce was out. Faye Alder, yes, that Faye, was back. In the corner near the coffee machines, 2 engineers from the UX team whispered over half-eaten muffins. Wait, so she was working with us the whole time? I mean, she was in the same Slack channel. Remember when she pointed out the notification lag bug in Beta 5? You're telling me the woman who caught that was the founder's sister? No. I'm telling you she is the majority owner of this place. A silence followed. Then, dude. That's so baller. Faye had arrived early, before sunrise. The boardroom was now behind her. The real work was here, on the floors where code was built, where designs were tested, where late-night bugs were squashed by bleary-eyed 20-somethings who believed they were building something that mattered. She wasn't here to bask in applause or wave a victory flag. She was here to rebuild. Her first move was bold, an all-hands meeting, not in a formal auditorium, but in the open central space on the 10th floor, surrounded by glass-walled offices and whiteboards filled with half-erased diagrams. Chairs were dragged in. Employees stood shoulder to shoulder, clutching coffee cups and curiosity. Faye stepped onto a small riser someone had set up. She wasn't wearing heels or a power blazer. Just a navy sweater, jeans, and sneakers. But her presence was commanding. "Hi," she said simply. "If I haven't met you yet, I'm Faye Alder. You might have known me as Faye Miller from product design." A ripple of recognition. Some laughter. A few gasps. "I didn't come back to punish or clean house. I came back because I believe in this company. Not as a concept, or a brand, but as you. The people." She paused, scanning the crowd. "We've lost a lot. Not just time or resources, but trust. And I take responsibility for my part in that. I stepped back when I should have stepped forward. I watched in silence when I should have spoken up. But that ends now." The room was pin-drop silent. In the coming weeks, there will be changes, but not the kind you fear. No mass layoffs. No secret mergers. Instead, we'll be rolling out 3 major initiatives. She raised one finger. First, the reinstatement of legacy development. Some of our most meaningful products came from that department. It will be fully staffed, funded, and brought back to life. A small cheer from the back. Second, we're launching an internal review board, made up of you, not just execs, focused on transparency, culture, and safety. Surprised murmurs. And third. She hesitated. We're reopening the old mentorship pipeline. The one Camilla cut last year. The one that helped junior employees become leaders. Because Kestrel isn't about profit margins, it's about people who build things that matter. This time, applause spread naturally. Not thunderous. Not dramatic. Just real. Honest. Faye stepped down from the riser and spent the next hour shaking hands, answering questions, listening to feedback. She didn't flinch when an intern nervously asked, "So, are we still profitable?" She smiled. "Yes. But it's time we measure value in more than dollars." By late afternoon, She returned to what had once been Camilla's office, now hers again. The decor was still sterile, glass, chrome, and abstract art that looked like anxiety frozen in acrylic. She made a mental note to replace it with plants. Maybe books. Alan, the company's senior counsel, stepped in with a fresh folder. His expression was calm, but the lines on his face showed the weight he carried. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said, setting the folder down. A full breakdown of the Onyx merger negotiations. And the offshore transfer agreements Camilla was finalizing. Faye flipped through the documents. Her heart sank. "These were hours from being locked in," Alan said. "We got lucky." "No," she replied quietly. "We got warned." Alan raised a brow. "People spoke up," she said. "Some took risks. That doesn't happen in a company that's totally broken. It means there's still fire here. Still hope." Alan gave a slow nod. "Then it's time to turn that spark into something solid." Over the next week, Faye threw herself into the ashes, burned out departments, forgotten employee concerns, missed opportunities. Every day, she met with teams Camilla had ignored: quality assurance, accessibility, employee wellness. She walked floors unannounced. Listened more than she spoke. In one meeting, she sat with a team of 5 developers who had worked on a shelved mental health app for teens. Their project had been cut due to low profitability. "Pull it back out," she told them. "This matters." In another, she found an HR intern who had kept a secret folder of exit interviews from the past year, each filled with cries for help. One line stood out: "I don't want to quit. I just want to stop disappearing." Faye carried that line with her for days. On Friday, she invited one unexpected group to her office: the maintenance staff. The people who kept the lights on, the air clean, and the building running. No one had ever invited them to an executive office before. They sat nervously at the conference table until Faye walked in with 2 trays of empanadas from a local shop. "I'm not here to talk," she said. "I'm here to thank you. And to ask what you need that you're not getting." The conversation lasted 2 hours. By the end of the day, Faye had issued a formal order: all contract staff were to be offered full-time positions with benefits within 60 days. No exceptions. Word traveled fast. And the mood across Kestrel Tech shifted again, subtly, but permanently. Late one night, as she reviewed code revisions in her office, Faye looked up and saw her reflection in the window. Behind her, the lights of the city blinked like embers. She was exhausted. But alive. This wasn't the legacy her brother had dreamed of. Not yet. But it was a foundation. A sketch of something stronger than before. A blueprint. The next phase wasn't about returning to the past. It was about designing a future worth building together. From the ashes, the new Kestrel Tech was rising. Not on metrics. Not on power plays. But on people who remembered why they started, and weren't afraid to begin again. It started with an anonymous email. Subject: "Before you finish cleaning house." The body was short, just 2 sentences. "There's something in the archive. Level B2. Room 117. You need to see what was erased." Faye sat at her desk, staring at the screen. She had already dealt with a whirlwind of policy reversals, employee reinstatements, and restructuring plans over the last 2 weeks. Yet this message carried a chill that made her skin prickle. Level B2 wasn't on the standard office map. She had worked in this building for years, first as a founder, then covertly as a mid-level designer, and she'd never been below B1. The archive was a word rarely mentioned anymore. A relic from the early days when data backups were stored on drives instead of clouds. She forwarded the message to Alan with a note. "Meet me in 20. Discreetly." The sub-basement was colder than expected. Industrial lighting flickered overhead, casting shadows on the concrete walls. Alan arrived, flashlight in hand, wearing an expression somewhere between skeptical and curious. "You sure this isn't just someone trying to spook the new queen?" He joked, though his voice was quiet. "Probably," Faye muttered. "But I want to know what's down here before someone else does." Room 117 was a narrow, steel-doored chamber tucked behind a forgotten loading corridor. A fitted metal plate read "Archive Room, established 2008. No keycard needed, just a rusted manual latch." Inside were rows of dust-covered servers, filing cabinets, and stacks of backup drives. At the back of the room, a single computer hummed, still connected, still active. A small sticky note was affixed to the top. Legacy logs. System user, AR login pass, Kestrel Star 2008. Alan raised an eyebrow. That's Arjun Reddy. He was CTO under your brother. Faye entered the credentials. The screen blinked to life. A list of audio files and internal reports appeared, sorted by year. She clicked the first from 2 years ago. Audio, R&D team exit debrief, May 14. The voice crackled through, dry, defeated. We raised concerns to Camilla's office. We warned that the health tracker's predictive algorithm was flagging false emergencies. She said we were being alarmist. 2 users ended up in the ER because their devices misread baseline vitals. Alan's jaw tightened. We never saw that report. Faye clicked another. Audio, QA dismissal appeal, September 3. A young woman's voice, trembling. I refused to sign off on the release of the Learn Suite patch. It disabled the accessibility settings. Camilla said it wasn't a priority demographic. I said that was discrimination. She terminated me within 24 hours. Faye's chest tightened. It wasn't just budgets or layoffs. It was voices. Dozens of them. Silenced. Suppressed. Buried. By the next morning, Faye had heard enough. With Alan's help, she compiled a full report, an exposé of every unethical decision, every redacted concern, every ghosted employee who had tried to do the right thing. The files had been stored off-grid, quietly scrubbed from internal audits by a contracted IT firm now linked to one of Camilla's consulting contacts. We need to go public with this, Alan said grimly. But Faye hesitated. Not because she feared the backlash, but because she understood what silence cost. She had been complicit, if only by watching too long. This wasn't about exposure. It was about amends. She began making calls. Not to press outlets. Not to regulators. But to them, the ones who had been pushed out, ignored, or forced to sign exit agreements. One by one, Faye tracked them down. Engineers. Designers. Accessibility testers. QA leads. Some were working elsewhere now. Some had left tech entirely. One was managing a bookstore in Vermont. She didn't beg forgiveness. She didn't explain herself. She just said the same thing every time. You were right. And I'm sorry no one listened. Some cried. Some hung up. But many stayed on the line. By the end of the week, 12 had agreed to return, this time as paid consultants with full freedom to advise and shape future policy. A few more sent in memos and recorded statements to be included in what Faye would later call the Restoration Report, an internal document that would become required reading for every Kestrel tech executive moving forward. And then, without fanfare, Faye did something Camilla never would have. She shared the entire report internally. All employees. All departments. No redactions. The fallout was intense, but not chaotic. Employees flooded the company's feedback portal, not with outrage, but with ideas. Teams that had once worked in isolation began collaborating, creating new cross-department working groups aimed at restoring core principles like accessibility, transparency, and user safety. One junior engineer wrote. I read the whole thing. It made me cry. Not because of what happened, but because now I believe it won't happen again. Weeks later, Faye stood again on the 10th floor riser, addressing the company. This time, she didn't come with promises or plans. She came with a story. Somewhere along the way, she began, we stopped listening to the voices that didn't wear suits or speak on investor calls. We forgot that good tech doesn't come from margins, it comes from meaning. And meaning comes from people. She paused, holding up a slim binder. This is the Restoration Report. It's uncomfortable. It's not PR ready. But it's the truth. Silence filled the space. And then, she smiled faintly. And now, it's part of our handbook. Every new hire will read it. Every leader will learn from it. Because we can't build the future if we're still burying the past. She stepped down. No applause this time. But everywhere she looked, heads were nodding. That night, she returned to her office and pulled out a small, weathered notebook, her brother's. He used to scribble ideas, quotes, and code snippets in it. On the inside cover was something he'd once said to her, in the early days. When we forget the people, we lose the point. Faye traced the words with her thumb. Not anymore, she whispered. She turned off the lights, left the office, and walked out into the cool night air. There was still work to be done. But now, at last, she was hearing the voices clearly. And this time, they wouldn't be forgotten. Autumn arrived gently, brushing Kestrel Tech's campus with amber leaves and crisp winds. For the first time in years, there was a quiet energy humming through the hallways, something deeper than productivity or deadlines. It was the sound of people beginning to believe again. 6 weeks had passed since the restoration report was released. What began as a painful revelation had sparked something powerful: movement, change, and above all, ownership. Faye stood by the west-facing windows of the Innovation Lab, watching a team of interns present a pitch to department heads and engineers. These were the same interns who, under Camilla's regime, had once been relegated to note-taking and fetching coffee. Now, they were proposing a new version of Kestrel's abandoned mental health app, reimagined with real feedback from teens, parents, and therapists. The lead presenter, a shy coder named Dev, spoke with measured conviction. "We don't want this to be another data farm. We want it to be a friend. A safe place to land. Built with care, not just speed." The room erupted in applause. Not because the pitch was perfect, but because it was honest. Faye clapped with the others, heartful. It was working. Later that evening, she met with Alan in her office. He carried 2 mugs of tea and a printout of the upcoming annual general meeting agenda. "I've never seen morale this high," he said, handing her a mug. "People are talking about Kestrel the way they used to. Like it means something." Faye gave a tired smile. "It should. It always did. We just forgot." She glanced at the agenda. The AGM wasn't just a shareholder formality this year, it was a statement. A moment of reckoning, not just for those with money in the game, but for the hundreds of employees who had stuck it out, hoping for a better chapter. And this time, they would be part of the conversation. "Did you finalize the employee rep nomination?" she asked. Alan nodded. "Unanimous vote. And she's ready." "Good." Faye sipped her tea, then set the mug down with intention. "I want to open the floor at the end of the meeting. Let people speak. No scripts." Alan raised a brow. "You're braver than most CEOs." "I'm not here to play CEO," she said, simply. "I'm here to lead a company that listens." The day of the AGM arrived with little pomp, but high anticipation. Instead of the usual luxury hotel ballroom, Faye had moved the event to the city's Community Arts Center. The choice wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic. The center's main hall had hosted everything from high school graduations to local debates. It was where real conversations happened. Investors, board members, employees, and community partners filled the chairs. A few brought spouses. A few brought notepads. Most brought questions. Faye took the stage in a dark green blazer and sneakers, her signature balance of authority and approachability. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you this year has been easy. It hasn't. But what it has been is honest. And that's something we can build on." She didn't dodge the past. She laid it bare: Camilla's tenure, the erased reports, the staff mistreated and silenced. But she also talked about the returners. The rebuilt teams. The new commitments to mental health support, inclusive product design, and a code of ethics authored with employee input. She showed charts, yes, but not just financials. She presented people metrics, employee retention, wellness survey responses, trust rebuild scores. The audience took notice. One slide read simply: "Profit matters. But people matter more." A soft ripple of applause followed. Faye introduced the new employee board liaison, Marisol Vega, a QA engineer with 10 years in the company and a reputation for fairness and fearless truth. Marisol walked up to the podium, nerves in her step but power in her tone. "This isn't a role I asked for," she said. "But it's a responsibility I take seriously. My job isn't to speak for all employees, my job is to make sure their voices are heard, especially when they're inconvenient." The applause this time was louder. When Faye returned to the mic for closing remarks, she looked out over the audience, some skeptical, some hopeful, all watching closely. "I want to end today with an invitation," she said. "Not a pitch. Not a policy." She paused. "We talk about innovation like it's a magic spark. But real innovation? It comes from being unafraid to be wrong. It comes from hearing every voice in the room. From making something better, not faster." She reached into her blazer pocket and held up a folded piece of paper, the last thing her brother had written before he passed. "I found this note in his old notebook. It says, if we ever lose the why, stop. Find it again. Then keep building." She looked around. "I think we've found it again." The AGM ended with no dramatic fireworks. No champagne toasts. Just quiet handshakes, meaningful conversations, and a renewed sense of ownership from everyone who had once felt like a replaceable piece of a machine. That evening, as the building emptied and golden hour light filtered across the hardwood floor, Faye lingered. She walked alone into the nearby gallery wing of the Arts Center where an exhibit called Foundations was being installed, featuring artwork made from salvaged materials, broken glass mosaics, sculptures from old tools, paintings on reclaimed wood. She stopped at one piece titled Flight Path. It was a bird, sculpted from discarded circuit boards and wire scraps. Jagged and imperfect, but soaring. She smiled. Perfect metaphor. The following Monday, she arrived at the office just after sunrise. Her walk through the halls was quiet, but she stopped to greet the cleaning crew, complimented a security guard's tattoo, and left a handwritten thank you note on the kitchen whiteboard. In her office, she opened her laptop and reviewed a single document titled The Flight Path Plan, 10-Year Vision, Grounded in Integrity. It wasn't flashy. But it was rooted in something far rarer, clarity. It would guide Kestrel Tech not just toward growth, but toward purpose. She didn't know if every investor would stick around. She didn't know if the market would celebrate her choices. But she knew this. If they flew, they would fly together. And this time, they'd remember the sky they came from.